You don't call it fundamentally, you call it sharp Christianity. That's your term. What do you mean by sharp Christianity?
Well, I have three. I have one is thin Christianity, one is sharp Christianity, and the third is thick Christianity. And sharp Christianity is what we've been talking about. And that's when, so I think religions function best when they are countercultural. They need to distinguish themselves from the surrounding society. And to some extent, according to sociologists, the reason for the collapse or semi-collapse of the ecumenical churches, the mainline Protestant churches in the last century, was that they failed at that. They stopped differentiating themselves. White evangelicals, to get to my subject, differentiated themselves by attaching themselves to the Gospels. They're much more scriptural, and they were more countercultural. And for a while, that meant that their numbers were increasing because people saw real doctrine there. They saw things that were really different from the outside world. But the sharp church is a church that increasingly politicizes itself and begins to divide its host society, begins to feel that it's at war with its surrounding culture, that is countercultural to what it sees as modern liberal culture, while absorbing essentially a lot of partisanship, a lot of politics. So it begins retreating from the universalism of Christian doctrine and towards something like capital R Republican doctrine. You see things like, for example, this is a number from Robbie Jones and PRRI that you've probably seen. So they asked a question that they thought they would never even ask in a survey, but they decided they had to. And that's, do you agree or disagree that illegal immigrants are poisoning the blood of our country? It never occurred to them to ask that in the past, because who would say yes? Well, by denomination, every denomination in America, majority, disagrees with that sentiment except one. And that's white evangelicals. They agree with that, 60%. Guess what share of Republicans agree that illegal immigrants are poisoning the blood of our country? 60%. So what you saw was an alignment of white evangelical church. I take your point. That doesn't represent all Christians, but it sure represents a crucial strand of Christianity.
Well, the importation of the idea of racial poisoning of a population is not just not Christian, it is obviously unbelievably opposed to Christianity. It is the diametric opposite of it.
This is, as Russell Moore and others, I think probably you have argued, there's a word for this. It's called secularization. And that's sharp Christianity, when it turns into partisan politics under another name, when it substitutes the gospel of MAGA for the gospel of Jesus. Now, but that's not the only thing happening.
Christianity, you sort of say it becomes part of the culture, right? It just becomes...
It becomes part of politics. It becomes part of the culture wars. Yeah.
So left Christianity, say, is just as politicized as right Christianity.
Yeah, though I would argue in a way that's thought to be more benign. You know, the social gospel, those churches, they kind of became consumer goods and faith through works and not salvation. So they were trying to send people out to do good in the world. They lost, sociologists say, their anchor in the Gospels, in Scripture, and they lost their distinctiveness.
Well, right now it's gotten a lot stronger because you can't walk into an Episcopalian church without the BLM flag or the trans queer flag with BLM added to it.
I didn't know that, but it doesn't surprise me.
You just go by any Episcopalian church. They're all festooned with the trans queer flag, which is a very aggressive political position. Did you listen to Bishop Budd's sermon at the...
No, I keep meaning to. What's your view on that?
Well, a lot of what she said was completely unobjectionable and uplifting and totally fine. I had no problem with all of it. There were a few things that I thought went over the line. So you talk about apocalypticism. Here's what she said. She talked about elections. She said, but for some, quote, the loss of their hopes and dreams will be far more than political defeat, but instead a loss of equality and dignity in their livelihoods. So she is specifically citing the apocalyptic nature of voting for Trump. Then she says, there's another point we make, do not be afraid. Be not afraid. Here she goes. I ask you to have mercy upon the people in our country who are scared now. There are gay, lesbian, and transgender children in Democratic, Republican, and independent families, some who fear for their lives. Isn't that fear-based Christianity?